share my screen. And then I'll tell you, the other document that's available to you in Basecamp in the meeting folder is the summary that I printed from Microsoft Forms that has like just their summary of the feedback forms that we received. So let me go ahead and start sharing. Yeah, this is the version. Okay, this is the one that has Caroline's feedback on it. So just to review, we had 68 people complete the survey. Most of them used Qualtrics. The range, I'm not sure why SurveyMonkey gave us an average time of 38 minutes and then said the range was 7 to 28. Maybe I did something wrong, but it seems like most people are completing the survey in 15 to 30 minutes. Although some people, if you didn't endorse any, the word is endorse, even though it sounds weird, but if you didn't endorse any experiences, then you got through the survey quite a bit quicker. We had quite a few students, which made me really happy. So total of 23 of the 35 people who completed the feedback form, because we had more people complete the survey than the feedback form. But 23 of those folks were students, which is great. I was really hoping we would get that. And then, of course, we had, I think we had a pretty good representation of folks from other roles. I didn't ask them to define others, so I'm not sure, but hopefully those are, I'm sure those are folks who are also committed to this work. The positive comments, I loved, somebody said that the language was mindful and tender, and I put that in because I just thought that was really nice, and I thought that was a huge reflection on the work that the survey committee and honestly, especially the language committee did on changing the language. Most people liked the language. They felt that we had done the best that we could given the topics that we were talking about. That was kind of the gist of all of the comments. Negative comments were what we were expecting. It's really long. There's a lot of explanatory text. You need more white space and page breaks. And a couple of people felt that the language might be too explicit, but didn't really give any specifics on that. And I'm not sure how we can really, I think we need to define what were our terms. I'm not sure I think we're just going to have some folks who are going to feel it's too explicit. But I felt like since most people felt like the language was okay, we didn't really need to look at that. A couple of people mentioned that they thought that we should have had the question order backwards. There's some information in general that says that putting the demographics at the end of the survey is often a better option. The reason that we didn't was because we would be priming people. If we put we have a sandwich right now. So we've got demographics, experiences, and then attitudes and knowledge about school policies and things. If we flip it and we ask about their attitudes first, we're priming them for what follows. And we really wanted to avoid that. So that's why we did demographics first. Demographics first allows people an opportunity to learn how the survey works and kind of get familiar with the mechanisms of the survey before they get into the more challenging emotional stuff. It's fatiguing. It felt like making a report. I totally get that. Too much repetition, which I totally understand as well. So there were some folks pointed out errors. A couple of the errors we've already been able to correct, but some of them I'm going to go through with the person who entered it into Qualtrics and see if we can figure out where those errors are coming from and fix those. Okay. This is really important. I highlighted this note because this is a question that we haven't discussed that's really, really important. And we probably should talk about this in implementation as well, but I wanted to get your feedback in case you're not going to be in implementation on Monday or on Tuesday. Sometimes people will use the data from an incomplete or unsubmitted survey. Sometimes you discard those. What ends up happening is that you find that a lot of people have put a lot of effort into working on the survey, but then for some reason don't complete it and don't submit it. For this particular topic, I feel like if we make it, and I've got something in there, if we make it clear, yeah, that, one last step, very important, click the submit button is another way of just ensuring that we've got their consent for everything that they've just said. And so even though we will lose data because there will be people who will not submit, who will have entered the whole survey but then won't click submit, we have the potential of losing that data. I feel like it's really important, but I wanted to know what you all thought. So.
Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Okay, this is Adea. The reason why we agreed that they had to submit is because if you have, let's suppose, because it's anonymous and we're not capturing IP addresses and they're not starting off where they left off, let's suppose they get interrupted in the survey and they want to come back, we can't get that information because it's anonymous. So you could end up overcounting if someone starts, then start again. So what we did, we only looked at completed surveys. And I think we mentioned something like, okay, because this anonymous, we can't look at incomplete surveys because it could be double counting. So that's why um, that's why you don't do that, especially if you're not capturing IP addresses and know who it is that's submitting.
Thank you. That's a really good point. Oh, sorry, Jenna. I can't really see the little screen. I just saw your hand. Just go ahead and jump in. Oh, can't hear you. Sorry.
My voice has been sounding like a robot on Teams lately. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I agree with the folks in the chat. I'm wondering if, and I forget if we already talked about this, if there is a note when people close out of the survey telling them that they can come back and do the survey later if they would like to. Because I think that would be important also for consent. If we're leaning on consent for not sharing people's information unless they follow through the whole survey, we know that many survivors are going to be activated going through the survey. And so but they may want their voice to be counted. And so I'm wondering if there's a note when people exit out saying, reminder, you can come back and finish this if you would like this to be counted.
But the problem is if you do that, that means you have to capture their information and you know who they are so that then the survey will not be anonymous. So if you know
Okay,
their
so there,
name and information, that's the only way I know that. I don't know how the others, I know Qualtrics work that way because that was one of the limitations. In order for it to come back, we had to know their email address, we had to capture their IP address, we had to know who they are. So when they enter the survey again, we instantly can put them back where they were. So that means, I mean, maybe it has changed in a couple years. Maybe there's a way, but we didn't want to double count people.
Right.
yeah, that makes sense.
I think Adea, I think ours is set up differently. I think as long as you have the link to Qualtrics, you can go in. It's not there are some links that expire as soon as you click them. You can only use so you would receive, as a student, you would receive an email with a link in it. You would click on that link. That link would only work once. So that's one way to do it, and that avoids double counting, and that also ensures that the only people who are answering the survey are those who are students. But what that also does is allow you to know which links have been used. Even if you're not collecting IP addresses, you might be able to know which links had been used, and then you would know who had completed the survey or not. So I think we're probably going to recommend against that, even though it's a way of ensuring that, for example, somebody doesn't get on social media and say, hey, everybody fill out this survey for, regardless of where they go to school. It's
So
just, it's,
if
yeah.
so, let's suppose someone has a unique link for that day, right? Or that time period, and they did not complete it, or they started but did not complete it. Even if you give them a new link, um, how do you know? so you delete, how do you know that survey is theirs? Or I'm just trying to see how that,
Right.
even with that.
Yeah, we don't want to know that the survey is theirs. That's why the link is just a link. It's just here's a link to Qualtrics survey.
Yeah, that's how it works. It's anonymous, so it's just a generic link that you
Yes.
open for a time period. So therefore, we only on the back end, so we told them ahead of time that we could not do incomplete surveys. I think we told them at the beginning that for your survey and for your voice to be heard, pretty much for your voice to be heard, please submit. And then we reminded them at the end and then on the back end, what we did was only downloaded ones that were complete because we had several people that started and did not go back.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's what we would do. They would just be able to enter the survey again anytime they wanted to. Not at the same point they left, they would have to start over again.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It double
Yeah,
count.
okay. Okay, so I think we're on the same page there. And Jenna, I like the idea of adding to the exit message. If you choose not to submit now, you can come back later and complete the survey. You will have to start over again. I think that's important information for them to have because again, we're trying to be really transparent about the mechanics of this. We want them to have as many options and choices as possible. So, okay. All right. Well, thanks. I'll take that feedback into the implementation meeting on Monday. Okay, so going through in interest of time, because it's already 11:15, just the most important discussions and suggestions. And if we get through these, we can get into the least, what I consider to be the less important to discuss, I should say, the ones that need more discussion versus less discussion, because all the suggestions were important. Don't use person who had sex with you. So the language that we currently use is we talk about, the person who had sex with you or the person who controlled or harmed you. We can change that to other person. We just historic, just so you know, months ago we had a discussion that said, no, we should include this more explicit language. And we had other person and we changed it to this. But it looks different when you're looking at the survey, right? So the suggestion was to just change it to the other person. And I just wanted to know what the council thought of that. Let's see if I can, yeah, there we go. So that's this. And again, I can't see the chat and I can't see hands raised. So if folks have comments and can join us, or if there's a comment that someone can't, if someone could read that, that'd be great.
Yeah, there's a few of us saying that we like the words other person. And I was just curious to clarify, is there something before that that says more specifically what we're talking about, and then we start using the language other person or persons?
So so you've already said, did you have these experiences? Yes, I had those
Okay.
experiences. And when and where did it happen? And now this is where we're asking about the affiliation of the person. Were they affiliated with the school or not? Were you in a relationship or not? So, and then that's the language. In this section, we're going to ask about the person or people who did those things. There are many ways to describe such a person. Yeah, and we put that in there because we don't want people to say, other person, that was the person who raped me. They're not the other person, right? Like we want to make it clear that we're not trying to minimize their behavior. We're just trying to make it feel like it applies to anyone who might be answering this question.
Well,
And so,
three of us in the chat agree with the language other person,
okay,
other persons.
okay. Great. Is there anyone who wants to retain the original language? Yay. All right, moving on. A suggestion, add language about attempted as well as completed sexual misconduct. So the problem with this is, so I understand what they're saying. They're saying, someone tried to sexually assault me, someone actually sexually assaulted me. The problem with that is that if we add that attempting language, we basically need to double the length of the survey, because we can't say, did someone try to do this thing or do this thing to you? And in one question, because that's collecting two different pieces of information, right? They tried, they did. There might also be instances where someone experienced an attempted incident as well as a completed incident. And so they would answer both of those.
I would say don't distinguish between them, because even if they attempted it, it has just as much trauma as completing it. So I would just say stick with, I would just say attempted. I think that's what we had, right?
Is there a reason, Rowan, that we wouldn't want to capture both numbers as one in the data? Would that be bad? Because I agree with Adea that
I think there's a couple of things. One, the trauma from an attempted, and if we're talking specifically about sexual assault, maybe not quite so much, but if we're talking about attempted sexual harassment, not quite sure what that might look like. If we're talking about attempted stalking or attempted domestic violence. So really, we're really kind of focusing on sexual assault here. There are a couple of things. One, if we are trying to provide numbers that will be useful to the colleges and to people who are comparing the results from the survey with the results from that college's report of what they're hearing. Okay, so these are two different things. The colleges are going to report, this is how many reports we got, this is how many were investigated, this is how many were found to have violated the policy. In most cases, attempted sexual assault isn't going to violate the policy.
Oh, okay.
So we can't compare those two. The other thing, and this is more broadly political, and those of you who are still working in the field might have a different opinion, but there's so much pushback on, oh, now you're calling everything sexual assault, right? So you're
Oh.
mixing together attempts at sexual assault. Somebody tried to make me stay in their room so that, and I think that their plan was to sexually assault me, as well as people who they made me stay in their room and they sexually assaulted me. You're mixing all of that together, and that means that you're really over-reporting the actual number of people who had these experiences. So
is that possible that we could ask like one question about, were there any did you have additional attempts of these experiences that wasn't completed? Yes or no, or something like that? Or is it something even important to capture? Because is it something I was thinking important, meaning capturing their feelings or what they think happened, but then if everybody has different definitions and then we have inflated numbers, then I can see that, because then you're having people, okay, never mind. So you don't think just even having one question on the attempt would matter? And then I got to think of, what are we going to use that data for if we do capture it?
yeah, that's kind of it. If we ask the question, did someone try to do this bad thing? And did someone do this bad thing, actually do this bad thing? Did someone try but not succeed in doing this bad thing? Why would we ask that second question? Like, how would that be valuable? I guess is my question. If we don't ask the follow-up questions of where did it happen, when, was the person affiliated, is the information that, 70% of people experienced attempted sexual assault. And 30%, I'm making numbers up here, obviously, right? If you say something like 70% experienced attempted sexual assault, 30% experienced completed sexual assault, does that add to the colleges? Does that add to public understanding of what the problem is on campus? Maybe it does. Does it add to the college's ability to provide prevention and response resources? Maybe it does.
I don't know if this would be appropriate or not, but what if it was something like in the initial question before it goes to the more detailed questions, have the participant mark if it was attempted or completed sexual misconduct. Then if it's attempted, maybe it skips past all the following questions. And it's just like a general database about how many attempts students are facing. And then that way, because I think that does tie into like the college campus culture and also some forms of prevention to look into for the college campus. Because it like, I'm going to try not to get too graphic, but it might be like that an attempt is in progress, but then someone interrupts them or something else happens. So then they can't move forward with what they're attempting to do.
Okay. So I think it would need to be two questions, because if we asked, did someone actually, did these things happen? Someone did it, someone tried to do it. Person could answer both of those things for different incidents, right? And so we wouldn't want them to skip if they answered both of those. So it would need to be two questions. Did someone try to do this thing? Did someone actually do this thing? If we ask them, did someone try to do this thing? If we don't ask for details about when, where, and who, it adds a limited amount to our understanding. Is it worth asking another question? And do we just want to ask the question for sexual assault, or do we want to ask it for other forms of violence too? If it's just one question, I feel differently about it than adding a whole nother section to each type of sexual assault or type of sexual misconduct.
Personally, I think it would add some value to ask the one question. Just to give schools an awareness of how prevalent, because I'm assuming that number will be higher than the completed. I think it could be valuable. I think if the committee decides that there's just no space, or the value added does not equal, whatever we're asking of folks, it could be another point where you put a note up around, and we could draft something around like validating experiences of attempted sexual assault as traumatic, and also not something that we're going to ask detail about in this survey. If you want support, blah blah blah, all of the same note that we have popping up throughout.
Roland, to your question, this is Rudy Ann. I'm appreciating what Jenna just said in regards to wanting to know maybe more or understand prevalence of an instance or a moment in time. I guess I'm wondering around intention though, like how much of the data what specifically do we want to know? Do we want to be able to broaden it to understand that prevalence of just the situation versus something actually happening, or do we just want to know when it actually happens? I guess is where I'm starting to get a little bit confused as to what we want for the outcomes of this survey. Is like what do we have capacity to look at too, or are we asking something more obvious by including more of the almost moments? And that's just hypothetical. I don't know. I'm just seeking to understand better, like what are we wanting to know more of, I guess, is my question.
Really good question. I guess I'm thinking about how the information might be used. It might be, so for example, there were 70 attempted sexual assaults on campus and there were 30 completed sexual assaults on campus. If we don't have information about the attempted sexual assaults compared with the completed sexual assaults, can we use the information that there were attempted sexual assaults to help further to help further understanding? So I guess I'm saying, if we ask, did somebody attempt to have sex with you without your consent? If that's the one question that we're going to ask, did somebody attempt to have sex with you without your consent but was not able to? It becomes challenging because maybe they groped me, maybe they held me down, maybe they they did something to me, but they didn't actually penetrate my body, right? So that would meet our definition of sexual assault, right? If somebody's holding you down and groping your body, we would consider that to be sexual assault. But they might think, well, they didn't actually, put anything inside me, so therefore it wasn't really sexual assault. I guess I'm worried that we're going to end up confusing survivors. We're going to end up with data that isn't particularly useful to us unless we add that whole section, like Jenna said, where we're saying, we understand this can be really traumatic. We're interested only in these really specific things where, there was an attempt to do what? There was an attempt to, or you felt that someone was going to, or so I guess I think methodologically I'm struggling to try to understand how that might work. I feel like that's something that, but that's just me. So if we want to add that, as long as we weren't concerned that the schools might say, well, our prevention efforts are obviously working because there were 100 attempts at sexual assault and only 30% were successful, right? As long as we weren't getting that kind of, as long as they weren't, spinning it that way, I think I would be comfortable with that.
That's a really good point that you're making, though. I didn't think of that angle.
And then if we are going to ask that, I kind of feel like we need to ask a little bit more information because what were the circumstances where the sexual assault was attempted but not completed? Were those things that were happening at different times of the year? But maybe that's not important. Maybe just, we're interested in knowing if you had any experiences where someone attempted to do this but did not actually do these things. We could just have that one question if you want to do that.
Everything you're saying makes sense. Also, I am a guest of this subcommittee and I've been taking up a lot of space.
But you're a member of the council and you're here.
Roland, I think thinking back to what you mentioned, you did mention that we have the working definition on how we already defined it. That's already been decided, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that being the case, then we wouldn't want to contradict or add something that's not under that definition, would we? Or, I mean, wouldn't that change the whole thing if that were the case? Would we have to go back and rewrite the definition to include an attempt? Or if there is a category of attempt that falls into the definition, then it should still be aligned, right? Or am I thinking about that the wrong way?
I'm not sure that I'm quite getting what you're saying. I'm sorry.
Well, I guess when you think about the whole survey, think of it as a whole. The committee's done the work to establish the working definitions of what constitute, what we're looking for, right? And so if the debate is to add another question around attempt, will we be contradicting purpose and working definitions if we do that?
Mm. Yeah,
And if so, will we have to go back and change it or update it to align better with the question, the inclusion of said question?
I think we would need to say, well, we would want to ask about sexual contact without permission and then sex without permission. Did someone attempt to have sexual contact with you? Because we have those two things divided, right? So we could say we are going to be talking about sexual contact without permission, and we define it in these ways. And then we have kind of a list of definitions. These are some of the things what we mean by a person not giving permission for sexual contact or sex. And then we say, when we use the word sexual contact, we mean any of the following acts. Someone kisses or touches a person in a sexual way, touches or grabs sexual parts of the body, makes a person touch sexual parts of someone else's body. Did anyone attempt to have sexual contact with you without your permission, but did not actually have sexual contact? Like, that would need to be what the question said. And then we would need to have another one that said, did anyone, this is what we mean by sex. Did anyone attempt to have sex without permission with you, but was not able to actually have sex without permission?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
If we do not adopt it this go round, is it possible we can add open-ended question or open-ended something that we get back directly as survey designers? Could we have an open-ended question about, is there any part that we did not capture in this survey toward the end or something like that? Or maybe when people go to, toward the end of the survey or at the end of the survey, is there any part of your experience that we did not capture? And then we will have, and if attempt comes up because student says, well, it wasn't completed, but I've had an experience that was an attempt or something like that, that would give us justification to go in and start changing the language in the future. It's like, okay, we have a lot of students that gave us feedback. I know that we're going to decide how they're going to display the data, but having like a qualitative question at the end that we can get back at to HEC to look at something that we missed out on in the survey or some kind of experience that we did not capture or we should consider in the future, and something like that, that will give us more meaningful on how to reform and reframe the survey in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, there is another place where someone said that they wanted information, they wanted an opportunity to provide more information about every perpetrator And so one of the things that I had suggested was that we could add an additional, we could make it an optional response for each one that says, is there anything else you would like us to know about your experiences? But we can also, I'm trying to remember, I don't think we have it, but I think at the end of the survey, sorry, let me get back up here. We could put in a question that is there anything else that you would like us to know about your experiences with sexual misconduct on your campus?
Yeah, because I think that can capture things, and qualitative data. Sometimes you can get the best information. I'm a quant person, but I'm learning to
Right.
respect qualitative people.
Yeah.
Took me too
Okay, there
long
we
to
go.
get on that bandwagon. But yes, you can get so much information, and you just have to have someone that knows how to do thematic analysis or something like that and figure out what's going on. And that could be the justification if you need to change something about your survey
Mhm,
later on and improve it.
mhm. So the end question could just be, is there anything else you would like us to know about your experiences with sexual misconduct on this campus? Or it could just be with your experience about your experiences with sexual misconduct.
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'm also really curious, Jennifer, as a Title IX coordinator, I'm sorry, I can't see you, so I'm hoping you're still there. As a
I'm
Title
still here.
IX coordinator, okay, great. As a Title IX coordinator, is information about attempts useful to you in your planning and response?
Prevention planning, sure. I mean, things like that I use to talk about to do more prevention training or to fine tune like the types of training we need to do. So, I mean, attempts can be useful.
Okay. So for it to be useful, though, it sounds like you would need that follow-up information, who, when, where.
No, not necessarily. Um, just having we had attempts on the campus is usually, and like that's all I usually go with prevention. Like if that's a problem people have said that they've encountered, then we're gonna create some prevention around it. Doesn't have to be um like necessarily like a full report, you know what I mean?
Right, but if you don't know where you would need to know where it happened. Because if they're saying, did somebody attempt to do this thing to you? If you don't know that it was on campus, that would make it more
Oh yeah,
challenging.
on campus, off campus. That's
Okay.
the extent of what I need to know.
Okay.
Although we do prevention training about off-campus stuff too, right? I mean, I do all the drug and alcohol, like all that stuff, and that doesn't happen on my campus because we don't have I was gonna say a fun campus, but that was a bad word. Um, but right, so I don't have a party campus, but we do all of that sort of prevention training because we want to keep off-campus events from happening as well. Um, but specifically, if they can indicate on campus, off campus, that is useful information.
Okay. So I feel like then what we would want to do would be add so again, thinking about cognitive burden for folks, right? This would be adding two new questions. Did someone attempt to have sexual contact with you without your permission? And
Right.
at least where did it happen? And I feel like if we're going to ask where, we might as well go with the when and who too. Just otherwise, people might feel like they were missing. Like, why are
Right,
you just asking about where? Why aren't you asking about when and who?
right. If that is consistent with the other sort of
Yeah.
ways that the question was asked before.
Yeah.
Um,
And so we would
yeah,
need to add that. And then we would need to also like add explanation for this is what we mean by attempted. So, this is what we mean by sexual contact without permission. This is
Yeah,
what
so
we
we're
mean by
adding like one
attempted,
more.
right? And here's this information. And then we would need to have another one for the sexual sex without permission. That is, this is, so, okay. So if you all want to add those to the survey, we can do that. Remember, thinking about the cost benefit ratio, right? Is the information we would get from asking more questions valuable enough to the campuses to include, to ask for somebody to put the effort into answering those questions, right? Is the effort we're asking you to put into answering this going to be valuable enough to justify it? And if it is, let's add them. But if it isn't, then we wouldn't, because we don't have to ask about attempts.
I think attempts gets hard though, honestly. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, having somebody decipher whether or not they believe somebody attempted to do a thing, like you could get some really interesting data. I'm just gonna throw that out. Like I've had a report that somebody attempted to roofie me through the soda fountain in our marketplace. So that's not actually an attempt because that didn't actually happen. But you see what I'm saying? Like people sometimes think that things have been attempted that you're like that. I'm not sure where you're going there, but
Yeah. It's also asking
so
you to read the potential perpetrator's mind,
yeah,
right?
that's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't know that
Yeah.
students are necessarily very good at that. Um, just from my experience, right? That
Yeah.
I end up with lots of complaints that I'm like, that's an interesting leap. Okay. Um, right. I'm not sure how we went from there to there, but I mean, if that's how you perceive it. So I'm just worried about like what kind of data we would get, right? That people would be like, oh yeah, it's been attempted like all of these times. And then you're like, but has it really?
I think, I think, right. I think where I kind of agree with you, and without minimizing anyone's experience, but saying,
Right.
I know that this person was, and you might be absolutely right. This person tried to get me to go to this room and give me a bunch of alcohol to get me drunk so that they could have sex with me. And I said no. And that was an attempt. They tried to get me to do that. Right. I don't know that we would miss that if it was an attempt where they got me into their room and they were holding me down and trying to keep me from leaving, and they were touching my body, which is sexual contact without permission. And I know they were trying to sexually assault me. So that would be definitely sexual contact without permission. So we would capture the experience, even if the sexual assault part was not completed. This, yeah, around perception.
Yeah. I just, like again, like you said, not to minimize anybody's experience, but I do feel like I get lots of complaints that are like people just making a lot of assumptions about what somebody else's intentions were, right? And then, we get into the investigation and I'm like, okay, well that they were just trying to walk you because they thought it was dark and you were unsafe. They weren't trying to, like I don't know. I just feel like perception is hard to monitor, right? And attempts is really about perception in a lot of cases.
I feel like we will capture almost all of the attempts with the sexual contact without permission question.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Going back to those of you who are currently working as advocates, I want to make sure that you don't feel like we're going to be minimizing people's experience by that.
All of the points that are being made, I can see how moving forward without adding the question makes sense. Like if the information is utilized in a way that it's not intended to be utilized, that could be really bad, of course. And then adding more time to the length of a survey can be challenging for the people taking the survey. Like I know for me, even going through the practice run with it, it felt long. And as a student, it's really challenging to take and like put in the extra time sometimes, especially when it's a subject that's so draining. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I'm really hearing at all the input everybody's saying. And I love that there's the potential for a qualitative question to be included, versus just having the quantitative data. But yeah, I feel like it's important, just on a personal level, I feel like it's important to include, and then being an advocate of sexual assault, like I also feel like it's important to have that data in case there's any kind of prevention that can be done on campus or for the students, for support in that regard, or if certain changes need to be made. But I completely understand all the points being made, and maybe that's just like a whole other category of survey or something, and not to be exactly included in this.
Yeah.
Well, I think you made a good point. Like the qualitative question could capture some of that. And I don't think that the qualitative right, it's an optional qualitative question at the end. It doesn't add additional burden for students who don't want to, right? But even students who didn't would have to do all the additional clicking for the other and the reading, right? That and thinking back, like doing the okay, hold on, let me run through my memory. Have I ever had an attempt? What? And then read the definition again. Okay, well, wow, maybe, you know what I mean? So I like the idea of just having a qualitative question where they can either say, I've had additional experiences I feel are noteworthy, right? Yeah, I think I like that.
I think too, the question, and I'm appreciating what's being said too, and thinking about what Jennifer is sharing around perception too. I think it becomes a question of how do we mitigate basically the phenomenon that is happening under the DEI B or DEIA umbrella, where we are able to name something and we want to advocate to protect, but then we have folks that take it to a whole other level that's not what it's about, if that makes sense. And so then therefore ruining potential resources or true support for the students who actually need it, right? And so how do we then ask the question or mitigate to minimize that? So we're asking that, not minimizing this person's experience, but recognizing that, these are serious questions, and somebody just jumping in on it, for whatever reason that they do. And a lot of the time they're thinking they're helping, right? And so how do we mitigate for that, I guess, is, if we do expand it like that and define it correctly, how are we able to weed out the folks that aren't really falling under the definition, and that way the folks that are experiencing what we're looking for rise up to the top in the data. And that's probably easier said than done, but I guess I'm just understanding and feeling what Jennifer's experience is, where we have a lot of people that, I mean, for lack of a better word, jump on a bandwagon, and they think, and they throw out all these big words, and they throw out, what they think is trendy. And when there are real people that have actually are experiencing and suffering and doing things like that. And so I can see how that can get caught up too, in what this is trying to accomplish.
I really appreciate that, Rudy Ann. And I think to use Jennifer's example of the soda fountain, right? Is that student actually scared? Are they actually suffering? Are they actually worried? Yes, absolutely. And what is the solution to that? Is it providing sexual misconduct resources, or is it addressing the crisis that the student is having, which may have, they may have prior experiences which have made them have that, I'm going to use the word paranoia, right? But they may be paranoid because they've had prior experiences of being roofied, and now they're afraid that everywhere they go, they're going to be roofied. Do they need help? Absolutely. Is that the same kind of help that someone who's actually been has actually been roofied and sexually assaulted on campus needs? Probably not. It's is the prevention, can you do prevention for that? It would look really different, right? So I think that's what I'm saying. I absolutely have had folks in my office when I was working as an advocate who were in desperate crisis, in huge pain, and it really didn't have anything to do with sexual misconduct. And I wasn't able to provide what they needed, but they were seeking me because they were making that association. And if I tried to provide them the resources that I've got, oh, well, you could talk to the Title IX coordinator. That's not really going to be helpful to them in that situation. You know, what they need is they need a counselor that they can work with this stuff over time on, right? Does that kind of make sense? So I think getting back to this, we catch the attempted sexual assaults, a lot of attempted sexual assaults in the sexual contact without permission. I think we're going to capture most of them that way, right? So we will have that information, and we'll have more information about like who, when, where, without adding more questions. We can add a question at the end of the survey that says, is there anything else you would like us to know about your experiences with sexual misconduct? So we've got that open-ended question. We can add in the implementation guide that schools, we strongly suggest that schools use this data as a starting point for their evaluation of their prevention response services, recognizing that qualitative information is not, this isn't a qualitative survey, it's quantitative, and, continue using this as a jumping off point, continuing to look into what's actually happening on your campus by getting some qualitative data is probably a good way, right? So we can do all of those things without that minefield of, well, I think they were trying to sexually assault me. Which, sounds awful, right?
Well, it saves them from having to go back and try to count or, do that, or try to think of the one incident that was the most impactful or whatever. Instead, it just gives them a box to say what they think is important. So whether it's that I've had somebody attempt this but not succeed, or if, it's just, I think that we don't have enough training on my campus about this or whatever. I mean, all of that would be useful to a Title IX coordinator, but would also not add that much length to the survey, reduce that additional burden on the person responding, right, to the survey, because then they can just include whatever they need to, and they don't have to go through the whole, did this ever happen? Was it an attempt? Was it actually an attempt? Who was it? Where, like all of those questions, you don't have to run back through. You can just at the end, is there anything that I want him to know that I haven't said?
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a useful place for that, and that would accomplish some of the things that we're wanting to do with the purpose, right, of asking those other questions that were suggested, right? I think that it gives us a place to sort of capture those. Still.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, folks. We've got just like 3 more minutes here. That was such a powerful discussion, though. I'm really glad we spent the time on that. Next suggestion was asking, so what we've got right now is we say, and I'm sorry, I know that's really small, but anyhow, this is an example. This is all the information about sexual contact without or sex without permission. And then here we're asking about sexual contact without permission. This is what we mean. I'm not sure that's the latest language, by the way. And then we say, so we're talking about, this is what we mean. Do you want to skip these questions? Their recommendation is saying, do you want to skip these questions? And then after they've said yes or no, if they say, yes, I want to skip the questions, they'll never see what we're actually going to ask them. Like the kinds of things we'll actually ask them about, they'll just skip to the next question. Does that make sense? So we're kind of asking them to answer the question without knowing what they're actually answering, which is why I feel like keeping it the way it is makes sense. I think they were concerned if someone is so vulnerable or tender that seeing information about what sex without contact means could be harmful to them, that's what they wanted. That was what their concern was. How do folks feel about that?
I think it's important to clarify what we're asking. It's just that range, right, where you're just not going to meet the expectations of everybody.
Okay. Does anyone have a hard noon time that they have to leave? Are you okay if we run over 10 minutes or so? Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, thanks. Okay, and this is the one, provide opportunities for respondents to give information about every perpetrator. We really don't want to do that, but we could add a question to that would be a number, like basically a number 8. So we ask, did you have this thing happen? Yes. When and where? Who did it? And then, is there anything else you would like us to know about your experience? We could have that as a follow-up question. So that would be adding an open-ended question that people could skip if they wanted to, or could add more information about that particular type of experience if they felt like they wanted to in the moment. This would be in addition to that open-ended question at the end of the survey.
I don't know. What does everybody else think? I think having that open-ended question at the end should cover it, but I don't know.
It complicates the reporting because what it would mean would be for every section, we would have another open-ended question that would need to be coded, or you would have more multiple responses. It would also allow the person to provide information about that specific type of experience within, while they're still thinking about it, rather than asking them to think about it at the end of the survey. So it's pluses or minuses.
I could probably make an argument either way.
Yeah.
So let me,
Yeah.
so let me see if I can make myself lean one way or the other.
Is there any way you can, if you add something, I'm just trying to remember how we did it for each individual survey. I mean, survey questions, we allowed for write-in section, just in case, like a short answer write-in for if they want to say something that we missed out. I'm just looking, let's say question number 7, where it says the person, or let's say who connected. I can't see it. My
Yeah,
just a little
sorry, I
too
know
small
that's
for me.
really
No,
small.
that's yeah, but
Yeah, a little bigger.
not
Yeah.
applicable. Maybe that would be another thing, blank write in, where someone writes in a short 1-line response of something we missed out on, or something like that. That doesn't have to be a long expository, where you could capture all your thoughts, but it's like write in something really right there that we missed, or an option that we missed, or something like that.
So I
Maybe.
think that's what the option is. If we add number 8, is there anything else you want us to know about your experiences?
Oh, no, I was
That
thinking,
would do
okay.
that. Yeah. So,
Um,
and it
yeah,
sounded like you were saying at UP, that's what you did. You had,
no, I'm sorry.
okay.
No, we didn't. We had
Oh, okay.
something, we did have one question. Um, there was 2 areas where you could do expository, but we didn't do it after every question. It was 2 areas, and it was immediately after. We had a very short section where we had some interactions and what your interpretation of those interactions were. We said, did you experience this, 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 this? We're asking about their experience. And then we asked them the second question, what did they associate that experience with? So
Okay.
did you say that this was because of you being a female? Was it because of you being a blah blah blah? And then would you say I think there was a third question, would you say this is discrimination or something like that?
Okay.
So
Got it.
we kind of got 3 things because we tried to separate the experience from the interpretation of the experience.
Okay.
And then we said, well, ours was not a reporting instrument, so we said this is not a reporting instrument, but would you like to expound? And we allowed people to expound. And then at the end, we had another expository thing,
Okay.
but not with everyone. Yeah.
Right. So our question right now is, we have that question. We've decided we like the question at the end. Is there anything else you want us to know? Do we want to add is there anything else you want us to know to each section? So we've asked them about their sexual harassment experiences. They've said, this is what happened. I'm checking off your boxes here. And then we have one open-ended question that says, is there anything else you want us to know about your experience? Right. And then we move
I
on
think that
to
would,
sexual
I,
exploitation.
I think that would be too much, because if we ask them, is there anything, is there anything, I would rather them collect their thoughts at the end. It's like, thank you very much for taking this survey. Your voice will be heard, because I would like something like a statement or why we're asking this survey, what we're going to do with it. Your voice will be heard. It will help with policy, blah, blah, blah. Thank
Yeah.
you. Is there anything else after taking this survey and looking over your experience? Is there anything else you would like us to know? I think I would like them to sit back and reflect at the end. I would like that reflection to be at the end.
I
But
agree.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think it's a lot. Plus, it would be a lot of work for the people who've been analyzing the surveys to do. I mean, how many open-ended questions would that be then? 4 or 5?
Yeah, it'd be a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and that can really take some time and some bandwidth. And I don't know how about the rest of you, but I am still a one-woman office. And so, the more analysis you add to this, the less time I have to actually do prevention and investigative work and right.
Yeah,
So
it's a really good point. Okay. Um, Next one is multiple requests for a progress bar. So we can put a progress bar up there. It won't be perfectly accurate because if they don't answer, the progress bar will say, okay, I am a progress bar. I'm basing this off of 150 questions. Bye, Rudian. So you've already answered 30 of them. Well, if you're only going to answer another 30, you're going to see the progress bar won't be completely accurate, but enough people have asked for a progress bar that I feel like it wouldn't be a bad thing. And the thing is, everybody's got to see it. So if you've got anxiety about progress bars, then you're going to have to see it. So I don't know. What do y'all think?
that is a common thing because people want to know where they are in
Yeah.
the survey and how
Yeah.
much time do they have left and if they have time enough to finish. So, yeah, it's difficult. I think the last time I checked when I had to design the Qualtrics, there was a problem with Qualtrics doing their built-in code. I had to use actually, my boss got mad at me, but I'll tell you what I did. I actually subcontracted the work to a programmer. I literally had to go get someone with programming experience who knew HTML style sheets and knew how to program because we had to submit the program within because I actually tried to reach out to Qualtrics to do that. They don't have a built-in function to do that for all these when you have complex things. So I had to get someone who knew much more than just Qualtrics, who knew how to do programming to do that. And the person I paid for someone to do that. My boss was quite mad, but
Okay.
it's like you
So
want it done.
yeah, so we're not going to be able to do that. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, but both Qualtrics and SurveyMonkey do have like a progress bar feature that we can turn on. So if it
Yeah,
seems like
you
people
can
in general
you
feel
can
like
turn it.
progress. Yeah,
Yeah, you could turn it
we
on,
can
but
turn it
there
on.
was, oh yeah, we could
Yeah,
turn it on. But apparently, well, you'll see when you turn it on, there's a little bit of a glitch.
yeah,
So that hasn't
yeah.
been fixed. But yes, I would say in general, people really do like that. And students
Okay,
definitely like that, especially if you're in the middle of a survey and you're looking at, oh, this is taking a lot of time. I thought I could finish it like in between classes, or I'm looking on my phone. Do I have the time to devote to it? How far am I into this survey? So definitely some kind of, yeah, that was one of our number one feedback with our survey.
okay. Great. Okay, so we'll put a progress bar in. This suggestion I thought was really interesting. Reverse order of girl, woman in gender, because of the age of the people who are filling it out. I'm like, I don't know that that's. I mean, does it matter? We can certainly do that. Woman or girl, man or boy, instead of girl or woman, boy or man. Do people have a feeling about it one way or the other?
I've never heard that comment before.
Me neither.
yeah, I was like, okay,
I'm not a subject matter expert. I know some survey design and some stat stuff. I will let you guys talk about that. I have never heard that ever.
Yeah, I've never heard that either. And I've done lots of surveys. Yeah.
We found the one person that is annoyed by that, so we can
Yeah.
easily change it. It's not a big deal. Do you have
Okay.
I guess so. So I guess since it doesn't matter, this person had a problem with it. It's easy to change. You want to just go? We can go ahead and
Yeah,
change
if it's
it.
really low hanging
Okay.
fruit and super easy to change, then
Very.
yeah, then just flip them so that
Okay.
people can be like, I'm a woman, not a
Okay.
girl.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
All right. And then the preamble to the text was really good. It got as long and really repetitive. Yes, we know there's not really I'm not recommending that we make a change. I realize it's a lot of information, but the fact that it's pretty much the same information for everyone means if you're going to be seeing it more than once, you really only need to read it once, and then you can look at it and go, okay, that's the same thing. But I could also see how it's really annoying seeing the same, like, yes, you already told me that I could have a negative reaction. I get it. Right.
Was that a lot of people saying that? It was just a few.
There were one or two people who felt like that it was a lot. There were a couple of other people who said it's a lot, but I understand why you're doing it, and I think it makes sense.
Well, if it's a small percentage, if it's just one or two, and you said like 38 or 40 people took it, then maybe not so much.
And then define on campus, off campus, and within Oregon. I put this whole comment in because I was like, that seems like you're really splitting hairs there, because what we're asking, and I know it's hard to see, I'm sorry, it's really small, but we already ask, let's see if I can make this text larger. So this is the options that we've got: on campus, off campus, and within Oregon. And then they really got into the weeds with that comment. Maybe I'm missing something. I don't feel like it needs to be changed. I feel like it's pretty explicit, but I thought I'd ask you all what you thought.
I agree. I don't see why that needs to be changed.
When you say maybe they think off campus could include outside of Oregon and within Oregon. So off campus, that means off campus anywhere in the United States. And you're like, and within Oregon. Or are you meaning off campus in parentheses within Oregon?
We have in the options that are available, they can say on campus, they can say off campus and within Oregon, they can say in another US state or territory, in another country, online.
Oh yeah, I just see that. Yeah, you do have in a US state. So I don't know why they're saying that though.
I felt like they were overthinking it a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, maybe just put off campus in parentheses within Oregon.
Okay.
Maybe that'll solve it so they can instantly make that connection.
Okay, that's pretty much what we've got. So, okay.
Well, okay.
Yeah. All right. And then reading these questions may cause uncomfortable or negative feelings for some people, to reading these questions may cause uncomfortable or negative feelings. I'm fine with that change. I think it makes sense. Does anyone have any concerns about making that change? Okay, we'll make that change.
No.
And then make it more clear whether or not we're asking about behaviors within the educational experience. So what we could do is in the informed consent and then in the text so there are two places we could add it. So I think we wanted to be really clear, because Jennifer, one of the things I've been hearing from the Title IX coordinators and heard at the testimony actually at 3731 this week was that Title IX coordinators are dealing with students who've had experiences off campus as well as related. They're providing resources. They're working for students who weren't just sexually assaulted on campus. There's nobody who walks into an office and the person is like, oh, it's someone who's not affiliated with the school. Well, I can't help you. right? They're making referrals, even if they can't help them, they're not saying that, they're making referrals, that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, we provide supportive measures, whether or not we can actually
Yeah.
do an investigation or it violates our policy or any of those things. So on campus, off campus, I'm still serving those students.
right. And
Yeah.
those students are still being impacted by the things that
Yes.
are happening off campus, right? So I feel like, yeah, so I felt like that made sense, but we can add to I keep putting informed consent in parentheses or in quotations because it's just basically an introduction document. So we could put that in there. And then in each section's introduction, the next question asks about experiences related to sex and blah, blah. Just to be clear, we're asking about things that someone else did that you did not want. We would like to know about all your experiences since you enrolled at school, including things that happened outside school. We could just add that language. It's pretty simple. So,
Yeah.
okay. And then that's it, folks. So the others are fairly minor, I think, but those were the big ones I really wanted your input on. Thank you so much for the discussions. These are always such great, deep, meaty discussions. Yeah, even though we're all like, well, I can kind of see it this way and I can kind of see it that way, but that's why it's a discussion.
Well, I think that's the nice thing, right? That we get,
Yeah.
we can talk about the side we didn't necessarily see when we walked in the door, right? Or
Yeah. Yep. So, so I'll go ahead and make